Welcome to another episode of the Spone Trained podcast. I am super excited for my guest today. Today, we're going to talk about mental health and not mental illness because I know that's what this audience is interested in. And my guest, it really brings a new paradigm on what it means to be human and what we need to thrive as a human. I just finished his book, reading it again. He co-authored The Human Givens, which gets into a lot of paradigm shifts on how we think about humanity. So I'm excited to get into all that. Some of his other books include How to Lift Depression Fast, Freedom from Addiction, How to Master Anxiety. Today, we're going to get into hypnosis and dreaming, lifting anxiety, depression, and a bit of the nature of consciousness, masculine and feminine aspects of the brain and behavior. Welcome my guest today, Ivan Terrell.
Well, hello, nice to be here. I have to say, though, those books were also written with Joe Griffin. It's not just me producing
Correct.
this material. There was myself, Joe Griffin, and Denise Wynn.
Correct. And I highly recommend Human Givens. It was a game changer for me. And so we'll get into some of that. So Ivan, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into psychotherapy and discovered the Human Givens.
My first inkling that I was going to move into this area came when a chap called Idries Shah gave me a paper to read by an American psychiatrist who died not so long ago called Arthur Dykman. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote a paper called Sufism and Psychiatry, I think it was called. And Idries Shah gave it to me to read. And in it, he was saying things like, there is a crisis of meaninglessness in the West because we don't have strong purposes in our lives anymore. You know, we're not told like we used to be by religious organizations, this equals that equals this, and you'll get to heaven if you do this, that, and the other. Now, that's all sort of more or less gone. I mean, I know it still exists, perhaps more so in America than here, but it's not something that's holding society together anymore. And I read that and found it really, really interesting. Prior to that, I've been running a business. It's a completely different sort of business. And but then there was a big crash in '89, I think it was, a massive crash. You're far too young to remember it, Nicholas, but I had to close that business. I was employing quite a few people. And my wife at the time said, well, why don't you follow up your interest in hypnosis and psychotherapy and so on. So I started to study it. And in the course of studying it, I met Joe Griffin, who was teaching Ericksonian hypnosis in London and was absolutely brilliant. And we got talking a lot. And both of us were quite cross with some of the other schools of psychotherapy that were around at the time, you know, the active listening and the psychoanalytical approaches to the psychodynamic approaches, which were causing problems. And I quickly found out a major problem they were causing back then, and probably still are in some circles, is creating false memories in people about abuse that they may have suffered when they were, or that they suggested they suffered. Now, of course, as you know, Nicholas, hypnosis is really just focusing people's attention with confidence, and you can do that in a million ways. You know, you can do it with noise, you can do it with slapping their shoulders like stage hypnotists do, and all the other kind of tricks. But basically, you focus someone's attention, and it was Idries Shah who said to me once that hypnotizing somebody is the easiest thing to do. He said, and I remember he pointed to a spot. He said, I could just hypnotize you with that spot on the ceiling. And of course, I didn't know then that you could, but I do know that that's the easiest thing to do. You just focus someone's attention. And when you focus someone's attention, it's very easy for them to become locked on an idea that you can suggest to them, which is why hypnotherapy is incredibly valuable, but can also be very damaging. I mean, there's been some horrible things done by hypnotists, as I'm sure you're aware of, or hypnotherapists. And, you know, we can take it from there, really. I mean, that got my interest in it. And when I met Joe, we started to talk about all these things, and we said, well, we actually need, if psychotherapy is going to be improved, we need to get back to something basic. And what is basic is that all human beings are life forms. We are life forms, and every life form needs nutriment to constantly bring in nutriment to replenish ourselves, maintain ourselves, and replenish ourselves until we get too old, and like I feel I'm getting, and we pass away. So that nutriment is obviously physical, which is air, water, food, exercise, shelter, all those things. But it's also emotional. That's another. Higher mammals have a kind of an innate need for emotional nutriment of one sort or another, which we called human givens, because they're innate emotional need. They're given to us. That every baby comes into the world with these needs. Hang on, I've just got to get something off my screen. You disappeared for a moment. So yeah, every creature comes into the world with these innate needs, which helps them fit into their niche and develop and evolve and all the rest of it. And that should be the starting point of therapy, we felt. So we developed this idea and we started teaching it, and it really took off. A lot of people were very interested. We produced a paper on innate needs, human givens. And eventually we ended up running a diploma teaching people how to do therapy from this perspective.
Yeah, and it's really good. And so this, it kind of follows along my model of hypnosis, which is just rapport, and then whoever has the most certainty is the influencer, is the hypnotist, and then focus, right? Whatever you focus on becomes the experience. And so that definitely lines up with how I simplify kind of hypnosis down to those simple building blocks. And we'll get into that in a bit. But so these human givens are the things that we need to thrive as humans, right? So there's certain things, and often this isn't understood by modern psychotherapy. And like you talked about, there's some problems with that, and we'll get into that in a bit. But there's some basic building blocks, like connecting with other people, right? That for our nervous system, for our endocrine system to give us optimal functioning, that we need to survive. So what are the things included, or some of the things included in the human givens, that without having these essential building blocks, we're not going to have meaningful, fulfilling lives as humans? What are some of those things?
Okay, well, you can start with a baby comes into the world and it needs to feel secure. So it needs loving carers, loving mothers usually initially, but loving carers. And it needs to feel safe. And it learns to let you know if it doesn't feel safe, by crying or squealing or whatever. And so we all need safe territory in which to grow and expand and live as we grow older and learn and so on. So that's a really important innate emotional need, to feel secure. If people are not feeling secure, which they don't, if their jobs are under threat, or their health is under threat, or they're being bullied or whatever, that causes some problems.
And to interrupt you real quick, those babies under those stressors, or those, young children, whatever, they'll stop learning, right?
Oh yeah, they do. If because to learn, you have to be able to focus your attention, and if your attention's directed on something that's producing fear responses in you, you can't learn anything new. All you're learning about is how to avoid, or trying to learn about how to avoid whatever it is that's frightening you. So if you're being bullied or abused at home, for example, or in the school environment, or wherever you are, or by the culture generally, you can't really learn and expand. And that's a huge problem for the human race at the moment, certainly in our culture and yours, I would suggest. So you can see how, for example, we've had run this experiment of locking down. Have you had locking down where you're living?
Actually, not really. No, we've been pretty open the whole time. Luckily, different parts of the US have been locked down, but
yeah, well, we had lockdowns, which I largely ignored, I have to say, but it really affected a lot of people. There were people who were terrified to go out in the street, children, youngsters, because they thought they were going to die instantly. It was just ludicrous what propaganda was spread about this. So, if you make people feel insecure like they would in a war zone or in a bullying and toxic environment, that's a real problem. Another one is control, having a sense of autonomy, that you can actually do things yourself, and you can make things happen, which gives you feedback that you really do exist. If you can do things, decide to do something and do it. So that sense of control is another innate emotional need. And you see this in little children when they're learning to walk and talk and so on. They're really concentrating. And of course, when they're concentrating, they're in a trance, because in a sense, all learning, everything we learn, all our ideas, but also our skills are post-hypnotic, because we've learned them in a trance state, a focused state of attention. And you can see this wonderfully in children, but you can see it in adults that are struggling to learn something, or struggling to enjoy something, or not struggling to enjoy something, or enjoying something like music. If you're really into the music, you're in a trance, there's no question. So having a sense of autonomy, then control, is really fundamentally important. But you also need a certain degree of privacy, and that sense that you can quietly concentrate and reflect on the day's events, and reflect on where you are in the world and how your relationship's going and so on. So privacy is very important. But every child and every adult needs a certain degree, a certain amount of attention. We need to give and receive it. Now, this is the type of attention you get from other people. It's not the same, the attention has different meanings, and another meaning of the word attention is when you're giving attention to something or some task rather, but I'm talking about the kind of attention between people. So you're giving me attention and I'm giving you attention, and then this is an exchange, and you can't have a civilized relationship unless you have a reasonable exchange of attention. So that's another innate emotional need, and you see this arising in children. They certainly let you know if they're not getting any attention. No, they start behaving badly usually. That's what happens. Yeah. So we also need another need. We need sort of intimacy with other people, closeness, which of course can include romantic, caring relationships, sexual relationships, and so on. That's innate in us, and in various periods of our life is very strong and important. We also, and it's been known for a long, long time, that, and you've already mentioned it, if you don't feel connected to the wider community particularly, or not if at all, you're in real trouble. You start to get anxious and depressed very quickly. And so that's another innate need. And you can see when you have lockdowns, which you are fortunate not to have experienced, when people feel separated from others, that's what starts to produce real problems, and it makes people very easily conditionable, more malleable. Yes. if they get, because anyone can come along at that point and offer them some sort of community satisfaction, and before they know where they're in some sort of cult or something. It's not very nice. We also need status. So we need to be respected by people who respect us for who we are and what we do, or our character, or our sense of humor, or our skills, or whatever. But we don't need everyone to. We don't have to cry out for it all the time.
Right.
But we need to know that. So at my neighbor experience, respects my ability at fixing electrical faults. It can be anything simple like that, but they've got a degree of status with that neighbor because of just that one simple thing. But of course, some people are status hungry, and that's particularly younger people.
So many of these things fit into, kind of one, let's say, meta group, and we'll call that love and connection and belonging, right? So getting attention, having status, being loved, having intimacy, all of those kind of are deep within the framework of what it means to be human. And if you take those away, people are not going to be happy. They're not going to thrive. No matter what their doctor says, or, to give them antidepressants or drugs, if they still don't have those fundamental building blocks, it's not going to have a lasting, sustainable effect on increasing their quality of life. Right.
Right. Absolutely. It's a major problem now because of the kind of culture we've got where everyone's hypnotized on their mobile phones and so on. People aren't getting these other needs met, except in a kind of artificial way. They say, somebody once said, oh, I've got 50 friends who said such and such, and they're all friends on Facebook, and they don't know them, but they still call them friends. So it's kind of, so Facebook, of course, is hijacking these innate needs as best it can to generate income. I mean, there's another couple of needs, which again, you've already mentioned one of them, but I mean, developing competencies, developing skills. I mean, this brain of ours wants to learn. And this is something our education system by and large ignores, it seems to me. It really does. Young people, young children are driven to learn. But if they're not taught by brilliant teachers and have the opportunities to learn, they won't develop these competencies. And if you don't have these competencies, that's when this whole thing about low self-esteem steps in. You don't feel you can cope, you don't feel you can do things as well as other people and all that sort of thing. So that's a problem. And another need, which I think you mentioned already, is the need for meaning and purpose, to be stretched. And there's three main reasons that we worked out why how people get their sense of meaning. One is by serving other people. So that could be, serving your family, serving your community, serving your neighbors, working in caring professions or teaching or something like that. You're serving other people, your colleagues at work, whatever it is. That is intrinsically meaningful if the work you're doing is meaningful. Of course, a lot of people's jobs aren't meaningful, and that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way people get their sense of meaning. The other is by learning itself, just deciding to learn a language or to learn how to paint pictures or play a guitar, or really that's meaningful to people. There's a reason to get up in the morning, so they want to carry on doing what they were enjoying doing, learning something. And lastly, having attachment to larger ideas, which might be political or religious or philosophical or spiritual, something like that. So you feel there's something beyond yourself, there's something out there that is intrinsically meaningful that you're trying to understand, and so on. So that's another source. And really what meaning and purpose do, it makes suffering tolerable,
Yes.
And we need that, yeah.
Well said. So I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Robbins, but it seems that a lot of these are very similar with his model of the 6 human needs, just stated a bit differently. I think a lot of us, when we study multiple things, it comes together in very similar patterns.
It wouldn't be true if lots of people hadn't stumbled across them. And in fact, the knowledge about this has been around for thousands of years, probably, but certainly hundreds.
Yes. A few things you said. So you talked about learning, and I like how towards the end of the book, you talked about consciousness is linked to learning, and we'll get into that in a bit. I just kind of want to plant that seed for people because it's a neat idea that I hadn't considered. And then meaning and purpose for me kind of underlies everything. And your model of therapy is really, a lot of it's about just changing the meaning that people give to things. And that's so important in our lives. And what does this lockdown mean? And what does this mean? And what does this breakup mean? And if we can change the meaning, if we can reframe that, we can have a totally different quality of life just from kind of using that one lever, right?
Yeah, you literally can. I remember when I was doing a lot of therapy, a chap came to see me. He was a recently retired head teacher in a kind of small town, very well respected. But he was infertile. He hadn't been able to have children. And this had bugged him. And his wife said, look, go and see Mr. Tyrrell. So he came to see me. A simple reframe, which I got in when I realized how successful he was. I just said something like, so when you wander around the town, you must see the children you educated, and they're all grown up and they've got families. He said, oh yes, he said, they're always coming up to me and thanking me and this, that, and the other. And so I said, oh gosh, I've only got 4 children. You've obviously got hundreds of thousands of children that have passed through your hands. And you could just see his eyes widened. He never thought of it like that. A simple reframe.
That's beautiful. That's the power of using, your model and being able to change people's meanings as you just open up their eyes to a whole different way to view the world. Amazing. So another thing that's I've been pondering for a bit is, we're evolved to grow up in kind of tight knit communities, right? And these days, we're a part of several different communities, but we're never really as deeply ingrained and connected to each other as we were in the past. So talk to us about this idea of having too many tribes to be a part of and what that means for the meaning and value in our lives.
Well, that's an interesting question. So you're absolutely right. When you know all the people in your village, I mean, I live in a lovely village in the Cotswolds in England, and lots of people, and what their interests are, and some of them you share with them, and others you don't. That is intrinsically satisfying. But if you're living in an apartment block in a city somewhere, you've no idea who your neighbors are. You hear this sort of complaint, really. I don't know anybody in my street, but they know someone like the barber they go to have their hair cut, or the people they buy coffee from in a coffee shop. But it's harder for them to make friends, really, and to have community. And that causes an unease in them because they don't have enough good social connections. And very often they might have a partner or be married or whatever, and they put all their neediness for that onto one other person.
Mm-hmm.
And that can cause problems in relationships because they've become needy. It's like someone needy for attention. If an attention seekers are right pain, actually, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I always teach that neediness is the number one way to repel somebody. So if you're just starting to date someone and you start to get needy, that's like the fastest way to push someone away. And then back to those human givens, reading that section about attention, I realized that, most of what people are doing is just trying to get attention. When you look at it from that perspective, that most people are just crying for attention in certain ways, and they just don't have good strategies to do that. Right.
Spot on. But also, as Idris Shah used to say, you don't need that much attention. You just need a little bit every day. You need someone to talk to and show an interest or be concerned about you or whatever, or just exchanging the time of day. You don't need the amount of attention people come to think that they need now. They're, desperately trying to draw attention to themselves on TikTok or
they want to be famous. And that's
want to be famous. And that's a form of perversion of this innate need. And a lot of these needs can be turned to the bad,
Correct.
For example, the need to control. If you're a control freak, you're going to become, and you might become a Stalin, and be responsible for millions of people's deaths, or you could absolutely wreck a child by being a control freak and not allowing it to leave the home and naturally develop and become independent. There's all kinds of problems with these innate needs if they're mishandled.
Yeah, I think this is a must read for parents as well, because that control thing, I mean, I know my parents were great, and they also at times maybe were a bit more controlling than they should have been to allow, natural development. And for I think many parents do this, right? We have to allow children to make errors and be responsible for their decisions.
That's how you learn.
Exactly. Amazing. So another thing that's in your book that I really liked and I talk about a lot is there's aspects of what it means to be male and female. And so our modern age and pop culture seems to want to diminish those differences. And I want to bring us into celebrate the differences between men and women, masculine and feminine. And you have some interesting ideas about, you know, what it means to be male and female, and the different skill sets and tendencies. And so I'd love to get into that a bit. What's the difference between kind of the male brain and the female brain?
Oh gosh, you realize we're heading into tricky waters here, don't you?
Yes, I you know what, I don't claim to be politically correct, so.
No. Well, I've had some interesting conversations with women who think there's no difference between men and women, but most women say, of course there is.
Mm-hmm.
And you can illustrate this with all kinds of incidents. You know, you can start to say to people, well, for example, if you go to a dinner party and a man starts to tell a story about something that happened to them on holiday last year, and the man might say, oh, you know, remember we went on that boat trip and you were wearing that lovely blue dress I like. And she said, it wasn't blue, it was red. she really didn't correct a detail, you see. And she'll keep doing this. And this is a very common female trait, to correct the details in a story. But the man's only interested in the punchline of the story, you know, the humor or the oddity at the end of the story, whatever it is. And of course they end up after the party rowing in the car because he's cross with her and she's cross with him, and she can't understand why he couldn't see that her point of view of getting the color of the dress right, or what this right or that right, or what food they ate and all the rest of it correct. But to him it's just, you know, a relatively irrelevant thing. So that sort of thing causes problems. And there's other examples. I can't think of any at the moment, but I assure you there are.
So we have different ways of perceiving the world and acting on it based on the way our brain set up, the chemistry in our body, and kind of how we develop as well, right? So you talked about the difference between boys and girls as they develop, and how actually men tend to be, or, you know, boys tend to be more vulnerable because of the way they emotionally develop. And I guess let's get into this point about it. So the expression of emotion. So what's the difference between how men express emotion and how women express emotion, and why is that important?
I'm not really an expert at this. I was when I wrote all that stuff, but I haven't read it. You've read it all recently, you lucky man.
Yeah, it's probably been a few years for you. So
let me think about that for a moment.
So you talk a bit about men repressing emotion and women expressing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, one interesting fact is that there's a lot of talk always about men being the violent sex, but in fact the research shows, and I think we put it in the book, that initiating violence is about 50-50 on the other sex. So women are just as likely to start punching and hitting and scratching as men are to, but of course men being stronger and having a childhood career of scrapping in school with other boys, it can do more damage. So the ratio of from memory, it's about 1 killing for every 3 a man does, a woman does 1, I think, something like that. So I mean, the female sex can be very violent, but they can also be more emotionally cruel than men, because they're into their emotions more. It's not always popular to say this sort of thing, though. I hope you don't get inundated with angry feminists.
No. Well, I think, you know, it's important to talk about. I mean, you guys in the book use all kinds of data and statistics and logic to kind of prove this out. And I guess the idea is that, you know, men are more, let's say, more capable of doing damage. And so it's important this is the explanation, is important for them to have an ability to repress emotion, and women are much more expressive of emotion.
Well,
And
that's all true, Nicholas. But there's another thing too, is men are very much problem solvers. More, I mean, it's not to say women don't solve problems; they do that all the time. But men do it in a different way. There was a wonderful experiment done some years ago where they had this nursery of children, boys and girls, and they played over the loudspeaker a baby crying, a really real recording of a baby crying. And all the girls were making a fuss and saying, oh, what should we do? The poor baby, and this, that, and the other. And they were quite upset about it. But the boys just went, one of the boys just went over and just turned the speaker off and solved the problem, because it turned out when they scanned whatever they did, they registered how stressed the children were, and the boy was much more stressed than the girls were. So in that sense, men get very, very stressed by emotional upsets. And that was just an experiment to show, and the experiment was done by women actually in a nursery, and it was very good, and it's been replicated. So
yeah, and this was something I learned that was interesting, is that men tend to disassociate from those emotions because they are actually stronger in men than women. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. So the thing is, emotional arousal makes you stupid. This is a kind of a golden rule of psychology. I'm sure you're well aware of it. The more emotional you get, I mean, emotions are great because they're fuel, but strong emotions can make people really stupid. I mean, if you see a really angry person, they are really dummies at that point, but they can do a lot of damage and hurt people and all the rest of it, but they can't think straight. They can't see bigger contexts. And to see bigger context, you've got to be able to step back out of the moment into your sort of right hemisphere, as it were. Away, anger's a left hemisphere projection, and it just wants simple answers. You want to do as I say, and it's always grabbing and bullying and all that kind of thing. That's a kind of a left hemisphere approach to the world. Incidentally, it's a brilliant book called The Matter with Things by Ian McGilchrist. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. It's a massive book. It's massive, but it's brilliant. But there's lots of talks with Ian McGilchrist on YouTube to get the basic ideas, and he really stresses the difference between the two hemispheres and the roles they play in our behavior. It would astonish you. It's a wonderful book to read, but you'd need plenty of time to read it, or put time aside every day to read a bit more. I was lucky to read it before it was published, but I can recommend that highly.
Okay.
So the anger comes from people being frustrated and or they're not getting a need met, or they've taken offense, or whatever it is.
So this kind of segues into a few ideas kind of coming together. So first of all, let's talk about, I guess, these three ideas kind of tie in. So why people become violent and hurt others, how our neocortex, our thinking brain its job is to separate us from emotional arousal, and then how the REM sleep integrates into all of that. So you can take that in whatever order you want.
Right. Why people harm one another and are cruel sometimes. I'm just reading a book about the KGB, which is very interesting, and what they did and what Stalin did and how awful the communists were to their own people. But and they really truly were. Yeah. Can we what was the second part of your question? You started off with saying
how our neocortex can separate us, our thinking brain can separate us from that emotional arousal that's instinctual drives.
Yeah, if you had, again, you could look at the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and you could just see that when you have a society that isn't getting people's needs met in the way that we were talking about earlier. And people start to get angry and frustrated. And when they do that, they can become more and more irrational and lack empathy. A lot of people just don't sympathize with other people's problems because they haven't got the imagination, which is an innate resource, because we've got innate resources as well as, you know, innate needs. So that resource of imagination, to imagine how another person must be feeling and to feel empathy to that, you know, so feel sympathy for their situation, and not harm them, but look after them, or collaborate with them in some way. That is a very, very necessary stage if you're going to have a civilized country or relationship or village or whatever, is to understand that, well, that's just the way that person is, you know, they can't help it or whatever. You know, try and be nice to people. But some people do get very damaged. One of the main problems that causes that is alcoholism and drug use, and total frustration. Like, you know, if all your status has been taken away because you've got no job and there's no work in your district, you know, you can't get a job, and you start to lose that self-respect. So it gets harder and harder to get a job. All those things make people more likely to be angry.
So it kind of comes back to just those basic human needs, and people that aren't having that.
Back to that. You can look at any problem. You can look at relationships in a company, for example, from the point of view of innate needs. Are people getting their needs for status met in this company? And you can get, you know, the person who cleans the toilets can have status if people treat them right, because, you know, you give them a nice title and you ask them, how's it going? Is there anything else you need? So that they're respected by other people for their job, not looked down upon. So, you know, so it's not a question of status being the top dog. In fact, the top dogs are usually psychopaths, or often in big companies, social psychopaths. So which is a statistic that astonished me when I first heard it. Something like 2 out of every 5 corporate leaders are psychopaths. I mean, and of course they don't care about the people they tread on to get to the top, you know. So status is not about being at the top. It's about being respected by your colleagues and your neighbors and your family and so on. I can't remember what we were talking about. How do we get on
so that, yeah. So emotional arousal, a lot of the book and a lot of these, you know, needs are about kind of evolving to be the type of person who can look at something, become the observer of it, separate yourself from the emotional arousal, right? Kind of suppress that. And so that anger, that violence that starts to well up, we can, as humans, and maybe more so than any other species, obviously, we can separate ourselves from that emotion for the time, so we're not driven to act on it.
That's right. And we need it. We need that break on our emotions very often. If we don't have that, we can take a course of action that's going to be disastrous in business or relationships or whatever. The highest form of separation in that sense was called The Observing Self by Arthur Dykman, who I mentioned earlier. You know, he wrote a book called The Observing Self, which you can still get hold of. It's absolutely brilliant. It's not a very long book. And he talks about that people, if you're not attached to things of the moment, people, jobs, ambitions, or whatever, if you can separate from those attachments just for a little while, not, you know, not permanently, because you just become a dummy then, you too, you know, but sufficiently, and you can go into a state which he calls the observing self, where you can just see yourself as a center of awareness. You are aware of your own awareness, and that's all there is. And you can look at your life situation from far above, as it were, you know, well outside of yourself, and not see yourself just as a mass of aching bones and illness and problems and needs and all the rest of it, but actually look at the true situation you're in. And that is the highest form of that sort of objectivity and ability to observe your situation. But we should all be doing that often. Why, asking yourself, why did I behave like that to somebody? Why did I do that? Why was I so nasty to that person who has always tried to be my friend, for example? Or why did I say this? Why did I say that? So that you're looking into yourself from a position outside of yourself, as it were. It's difficult to explain. Like all things to do with psychology and human development, they're not easy to put into words. That's why the best psychologists are usually poets.
It's, similar to the NLP concept of changing your perceptual position, right? If I can put myself in that person's shoes and look at, if I can put myself at, look down at myself from God's eyes and have a different understanding. And as we change that perceptual position, we see ourselves differently. And as we become that observer, we can see our emotions, our behaviors, and then start to change them. And so I want to get into, before we get into the APET model of psychotherapy, I want to get into a little bit about what really makes this book unique in my perspective is your ideas about REM sleep and how important that is. So why do we need to sleep? Why do we have REM sleep? Why do we dream?
Why do we dream? Well, Joe Griffin, the colleague I worked with for many, many years, and I was the first to publish this theory. He tried to get it published elsewhere and no one was interested, especially psychoanalytically orientated journals. And I published it in our journal. It's essentially the expectation fulfillment theory of dreaming. And what he found out was, and it took him 12 years of research and research on himself and his own dreams and other people's dreams and so on, and thinking and reading the neurobiology of dreams and the brain behavior and so on, was when you start to dream, the orientation response fires. It's called a PGO spike. It goes off and that's firing furiously when you're dreaming, and it burns off a lot of energy in doing so. So if you dream an awful lot, you're going to wake up tired, literally. That's why depressed people wake up tired, is because they've been doing a lot of dreaming. And why they're dreaming a lot is because they've been worrying. And a worry is an expectation about something going wrong, something going bad, and so on. And we dream in metaphor. And it's all explained in Joe's work. And so we dream in metaphor, and this dreaming de-arouses us. And so that's a major breakthrough, the importance. And you mentioned REM state. When people are dreaming, as you know, the rapid eye movements start up, which is linked to this PGO spike. But you also see that rapid eye movement, interestingly, when people are learning something, or when they're being traumatized, or when they're being hypnotized. I'm sure you've seen it many times. And it's a very important area for study, really. And that's what we did. And particularly Joe, he studied it in great length and written a book about it, which people can get, I don't know, I've got a copy of it here somewhere, but anyway.
So it's, kind of as I refer to those, that we get that emotional arousal, and because as humans, we can separate ourselves from it. Well, that energy is still in our system, right? And so as we dream, that emotional arousal gets released during our dreams in metaphor. And so people who are overstimulated through the day, whether that's anxiety, depression, trauma, they then will have a lot of dreams to try to burn off that, and they'll use a lot of brain power and wake up tired. Is that, did I say that well?
Yes. Recuperative sleep, slow wave sleep, refreshes the energy in your body, and it does all sorts of wonderful things. The glial cells are refreshed with sugars and all sorts of things like that. So you wake up full of the joys of spring, hopefully, and you've only done, you know, maybe an hour and 3/4 or 2 hours of dreaming. But if you've done 3, 4, 5 hours of dreaming, and woken up and feel knackered, you're in no fit state really. Before you know where you are, if that happens 2 or 3 days running, 2 or 3 nights running, you start to feel very depressed and anxious and all the rest of it. So, and that's really important thing for therapists to know. You know, all kinds of therapists need to know what's causing depression. And the interesting thing, when I was doing therapy myself, because I did for a number of years, is that when you explain that theory of dreaming to somebody, just the act of explaining it, and they'll say, yeah, I do wake up tired. It's true. And they say, yes. And have you been worrying about anything? Oh, you know, I could worry for Britain, they might say, or the US, they might say, your country. And they start to talk about what's worrying them. And of course, what's worrying them is something to do with some innate needs not being met. So you've got a nice way in to helping them, just make some suggestions and so on. And it's then from that point of view, so it'd be very nice, wouldn't it, if you could just relax for a minute, and then you do a nice sort of relaxation induction, and then you can put some different possibilities and reframes to them, and metaphors and stories and things, which go straight past the left hemisphere, straight into the right hemisphere, which should be the master of our behavior, really.
Receptive. Yeah. So I mean, I guess it's safe to say that as we go through our lives, the more stressed out we let ourselves become, the less our physical and emotional needs are getting met, the more we're going to have REM sleep. And the more REM sleep we have, the less deep recovering delta wave sleep we're going to have, the more tired we're going to be when we wake up, the more susceptible to things like depression. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, essentially, for the most part, I mean, there are a few exceptions to do with chemistry of the brain and one or two other things, but essentially, it's worrying that causes depression. And of course, that's why there's been such a huge increase in anxiety disorders and depression in this COVID thing, because all the propaganda just was designed to put the fear of God into people, you know, so they're all frightened. And if you've got that in you, you worry, don't you? You know, so, and it's sad, but that's what happens. And people will say, you know, oh, I can't sleep at the moment, you know, my sleeping's terrible. And well, of course it is. You're worrying, so stop worrying about it. It may never happen.
Yeah, so we'll get into that in a minute, but I want to touch on your oh boy. Yeah, let's get into the APET model. So what is the APET model of psychotherapy?
Well, essentially, again, Joe came up with this one day. We were trying to explain why cognitive behavioral therapy wasn't in the way it was taught back then, 20 years ago. They had this ABC model, the activating agent, and so on. And we thought, well, this isn't right. This isn't how it works. How the brain works, essentially. We wanted a simple way of getting across this basic fact to the people that we were training to become human givens therapists. And it's this. So we kept the activating agent. Something happens, stuff happens to a person, whatever it is. The first thing that happens is that the brain pattern matches. It pattern matches to innate needs, firstly, but also, or innate knowledge, whatever you could call it also, but it also pattern matches to things that have happened in the past that are similar to what's going on now. So, and that pattern match is what produces emotions. The pattern match improves emotions. The T is for, you think about stuff some of the time, but people don't do real thought very often. They don't really stop and think most of the time. They're just ruminating or whatever. But so the T is for thinking. And so that's it. And it breaks down into a nice little metaphor. We've got this brain that's working on in a kind of an animal level, and we just call that the ape. And what we're trying to do is to turn it into a pet. So, which people quite like that. So that's the APEC model. In summation, the brain is a pattern matching organ. People don't realize this, that every time you see something or do something, or somebody is talking to you, or whatever, you're pattern matching. These pattern matching exchanges are going on to what you know and what you've experienced, and your emotional knowledge, and that's it, really. It's APEC model. It's very simple, but once people have understood it, it's hugely helpful in therapy, because you can sort of you know that you've got to go in at the level of patterns. You don't
Yes.
go in that you don't. I mean, do you remember? Well, you look so young, Nicholas. I'm not sure how old you are, but you're much younger than me. There was a horrible craze in psychotherapy where people said, you've got to let your emotions out. You've got to shout and scream and bash cushions and all that kind of stuff. It was disastrous. All the research, I remember talking to Michael Yapke about this, and he said, well, all the research shows that just makes people more angry. It doesn't help at all. Getting your emotions out, understanding emotions and being able to talk about them and getting a bit emotional is all right. But if you just go hollering away to people, it does no good. So the focus has got to be on the patterns, which is why it's telling metaphors and stories and case histories and my friend John technique, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that sort of thing, it works really well, because it's addressing the patterns and changing them, reframing the patterns, and that's what helps people.
Yeah, it's so brilliant, and it's so simple. It's essentially, and I teach, the two, I guess, meta skills that I believe we as humans have is pattern matching and then adaptability. And so as we recognize patterns, we adapt to those patterns. And so we're changing how we adapt to the patterns, because many people get triggered by the activating event, or, a lot of hypnotists will call that an anchor, something in our environment. We match a pattern, or that stimulus matches a pattern in our brain, creates an emotion in our body, which is a program response. And then that leads to the thoughts that we have, and generally our actions follow, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can change how we match patterns we can figure out, first of all, what pattern triggers the emotion. We can find out what that activating event is, change the way we respond to that pattern, and then our behavior after that changes. I mean, that's essentially what a good hypnotherapist will do, what a good psychotherapist will do. I mean, it makes sense as a model for change, and it obviously it works, right?
Oh, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And we have another thing called Rigar, which is a structure for a therapy session, and it starts with your favorite rapport, but then you've got to gather good information. So the I in Rigar is information gathering, which is done in all kinds of different ways, in the conversation and the observation and the body language and all that. You're gathering information about what's disturbing this person and what they need help with. And then you get them to agree to a concrete goal, not a vague goal like, I just want to be happy again, or something stupid like that. I just want to find myself, those kind of things are useless. What people need is concrete goals that they can see themselves working towards, and you can help them work towards them so they start feeling better. And then you have to access their resources. You have to find out, is there anything that's going to stop you doing this goal? So you do a sort of an audit of their innate resources and physical resources sometimes, and then you activate that, you make it happen, and then you rehearse it. And the rehearsal, of course, as a hypnotherapist, you'll know that you rehearse behaviors in a trance, because they're much more likely to carry them out if they've already done them in imagination in that trancey way, because the trance state is a learning state. So Rigar is the thing we teach. So that is the ideal therapeutic occasion.
So we can utilize trance, which is essentially very similar or even maybe the same to the REM state, the learning state. we can rehearse new behaviors, we can change the emotions of specific patterns in people. And then something that was worrying them before, it no longer worries them. And does it work that easily? Is it that fast?
Well, it does if it's something, but I mean, some people might be worrying about something that you can't do very much about as a therapist, but you can change their attitude to it. You know, this idea that it's what you think about it is the important thing. So that's kind of half right. But I mean, you can't help everybody, you know.
Right. And obviously everyone's different. Some people don't even want, they say they want to change. They don't really want to change. They hold their beliefs.
Exactly.
But we can use, you kind of mentioned earlier, since our brain is pattern matching, we can use metaphors to kind of sneak past that left hemisphere, to sneak past that critical factor, the critical faculty, and embed new beliefs into that system, especially in that REM state. And so that's kind of what your model's based around, right?
Yeah. Well, a good part of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Anything? Okay. So let's talk about, again, you mentioned psychotherapy, and let's say, we bring out this pillow and we say, pretend that's your dad and get angry at it and hit the pillow. All we're doing is we're strengthening the pattern matching and the behavior, right? We're not releasing anything. We're just building that even stronger in the nervous system.
Yeah. They're not likely after that to go home and see their dad and hug him and kiss him, are they? If they've just been beating him up metaphorically. I mean, it's just a nonsense. I mean, there's so many things in psychotherapy and counseling don't help people. For example, if someone needs some concrete direction in their life and you just keep saying, well, how do you feel? This thing that therapists are supposed to do all the time. No, I've seen them do it. Or, I've lost count of the number of people that said on our training that they've done a counseling course. And at the beginning of the counseling course, they have this serious introductory talk. And in that talk, the trainer says, the chances are, we're going to be doing work on ourselves. The chances are that your marriage will break up. So that is a common thing in this country.
A suggestion.
Yeah, but I mean, and of course, and the reason that would happen is because if you're looking at things that go wrong in people, everybody's got problems in their relationships of some sort or another. It can be something minor or something major, but the moment you start looking for them, you magnify them. You're concentrating, and then it's usually women. They go home and start attacking their poor husband or partner, because of something that's come up in this so-called psychotherapy training or counseling training, and that's a very common problem. I mean, counseling can help people, just talking. Some people just need to talk for a bit because no one's listening to them, or they've got no friends or whatever it is. But in times gone past, it was always the wise old lady or the old uncle in the village that people went to if they had problems, and they usually sorted them out, or the priest or something like that,
So traditional psychotherapy can help in the sense that someone can go in and get a need met for attention, conversation, maybe some kind of connection that they weren't having before. But a lot of times, I'm going to generalize here, but a lot of times they just keep going back to the same event. They keep rehearsing it in their mind. They keep reliving it. The emotions keep strengthening the connections in the brain. Yeah. And then that even expands into other areas of their life. And after years of therapy, they may or may not have changed at all.
Yeah. Well, some of them get worse,
Yeah. And so with
and
this,
they can become addicted to that. You can get people that are thinking they've got a therapist and they need to go and see them every day for the rest of their life or every week, which is ridiculous. A person in distress just needs to borrow someone's brain who's not as emotional as they are, who's got some knowledge of human behavior and that they can build rapport with and work with. And usually you can have a very successful outcome, as I'm sure you know, in just a handful of sessions. The problem is, in some types of psychotherapy, people then get hooked, the therapists get hooked on having people keep coming back because they can earn from them, you see. So they're earning a living by maintaining the person in this state of perpetual need for therapy, which of course is not healthy.
Yeah, well, I heard of a hypnotherapist who used to, at the end of his sessions, go, "All right, great. When would you like to schedule your next visit?" Right? Like they would make that suggestion when someone was in a hypnotic state that your next visit's going to be even better and keep someone in
totally unethical. Totally unethical. It's appalling. I
Absolutely.
gave a talk once at the Tavistock Institute on depression, and there were two psychoanalysts there, and they were describing how they get people out of depression, and it was so convoluted and strange what they're suggesting and how they went about it, using their Freudian and Jungian techniques and so on. And one of them was a woman, and she said, I just turned to her and I said, well, how long does it take for this process that you're talking about, this journey that you take these people on? And she said, oh, years. She said, years. And I said, well, the average person who's depressed, if they're left alone, they come out of the depression on average between 6 and 10 months. So if you're keeping them in therapy for years to get them out of depression, isn't that patient abuse? And there was a great round of applause in the audience.
Oh, you asked that in front of everybody.
People know that is an abuse of patience to keep them in therapy unnecessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of came to the belief that the root cause of depression is believing that you're a victim and you have no control over your situation. Because if the nervous system has a meaning that I can't impact anything in my life, the nervous system says, I just want to save energy. I'm just going to shut down. And so, and you talk about a similar idea in your book as well. So if we're not getting our needs for community and connection met, if we believe that we're a victim, and all of these things can put us in a depressed state, and no matter how often we go back to the root cause of that, or how often we take antidepressants, we're never going to really get out of that until we change some of those factors, right?
You've got to get your needs met. You've got to deal with what it is that's stopping you getting your needs met. A brilliant psychiatrist that I know called Farooq Okai, he said when he has a patient, it doesn't matter how serious the problem, if they're psychotic or whatever, he just looks at them and he thinks, well, what is stopping this person living a good life? And he said, that's my starting point. And it's something around the innate needs. So it can be the person's living in a toxic environment or working in a toxic environment. Perhaps they're being bullied, or they're hungry because they've got no money in the family, or whatever it is. It's always something like that. Or it's something to do with they're not using their innate needs, their innate resources. They don't know how to, for example, make friends, or, because the way they were brought up, they're not very sociable. So they can't get those needs met, to do with intimacy and social connection and so on. And the third one is that there's damage to them. They can be on the autistic spectrum. There's damage to the way they evolved when they were, in the womb, as it were. So there's genetic damage, and they might be autistic or have Asperger's or something like that. And so you've got to weigh in then when you're looking at these innate needs. What's stopping them? What's stopping this person? One of the big things is conditioning. And now our society, a lot of it is, people are being produced who are victims. They delight in being a victim and wanting someone else to take responsibility for their life, which is a dreadful thing, appalling.
So that kind of segues perfectly into where I wanted to go with this. Is today's society, today's media, culture, beliefs seems to be getting farther and farther away from fulfilling our human givens in a sustainable way. So what do you see as far as mental and emotional health in today's kind of pop culture and today's trends?
Well, given my age, I don't know much about pop culture anymore.
but you know what's going on in the media and what people believe. I don't necessarily mean popular culture, but
I was winding you up a bit.
Yeah.
Pop culture. I have you watched Matthias Demet, the Belgian psychiatrist. I mean, he was on the Joe Rogan program recently, or rather, Robert Malone was Dr. Robert Malone.
Yeah.
Had something like 40 or 50 million views, which is a lot of views. And the reason that this guy was on is because he said, actually, there is such a thing as mass formation. And mass formation is mass hypnosis of the whole population. And that's what's been happening with all this alarm about COVID and mask wearing and all this kind of stuff. And he makes a really brilliant case. He explains what's needed in mass formation. And when you think about it, what forms our individual character is how well our innate emotional needs are met. If they're met well, we do all right. And if there's something stopping some needs being met, things can go wrong. But so that forms our character and our personality and all those things, and intelligence and everything. So mass formation is about the same sort of thing, but en masse with the whole population. And he states quite clearly that, which again addresses the emotional needs. He said, yeah, absolutely essential for mass formation is a lack of social bonding. People are not bonded well with neighbors and the community generally. It's broken down. And sorry, just get rid of that. So that's one need. And another thing he said is essential. He said there's four things, and the other one is a lack of meaning and purpose in people's lives, which is really problematic for our culture. That's how it seems in Europe anyway. I don't know what it's like. Where are you? California or somewhere?
No, I'm in Iowa.
Iowa. I'm sorry.
You think because I have blonde hair, I'm from California?
I did actually.
Yeah, I know. American stereotypes.
Anyway, so a lack of meaning and purpose in people's lives, free floating anxiety, where people are feeling anxious when they're not sure why and they can't do anything about it. They've got no volition, in other words, they can't control what's going on, and high levels of frustration and anger. And if you've got those things, and then somebody comes along and says, wear masks, take vaccines, do this, do that, kill the Jews like Hitler did, or, the sort of thing that Stalin did, destroying vast millions of Russians, actually, as well as Germans when he fought the Germans. But you can get people to do the most awful things if you've got those elements in there, and those elements are all tightly connected and woven in with innate needs. And he's well worth listening to, Matthias Desmet. Actually, I'll send you a link to a couple of his films.
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's easy to see, and even people that I'm friends with in the hypnosis community, they understand these principles of programming people, and they don't see it. And it's, basically people that remember to put a mask on every time they go inside. They're acting out on a post-hypnotic suggestion, right? Yeah, or when they get angry with somebody and they tell them to wear a mask, that emotion that comes up is a post-hypnotic suggestion that they're executing on. And so they see visuals of people dying, they feel fear, they get a suggestion to act in a certain way, they carry out post-hypnotic suggestions. I mean, most people in this world are carrying those out, but it also suggests that there's some type of agenda where people are coordinating this intentionally, because to do this on a mass scale, it takes some brains and some know-how about how people get programmed. So yeah, I don't know. I'll kind of let you run with that idea. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but the idea that there's maybe something
it's very important idea to grasp, I think, because if your society becomes totalitarian, which is very easy to do because there are always people that want to control other people. They're usually often on the autistic spectrum, but they do huge damage. I mean, Hitler was an autistic psychopath, as people have said. Well, that's what he was. Obviously, from the future looking back, that's what they said. Well, that's what he was. He must have been that because of his behavior, doing this, that, and the other. And those people, they don't care what they do. They don't care what harm they do. And when you think about it, with the digital age, imagine if Stalin or Hitler had the control that is now available to people, where in everybody's pocket, or nearly everybody, there's a mobile phone, and they can program ideas and give you suggestions on that, as they have been doing with COVID. And before you know where you are, you've got terrible things happening.
And so the more emotional and the more repeated these suggestions are, the more people go into that trance and execute post-hypnotic suggestions. And so I think in this day and age, I think it's always been going on, right? Like, this is nothing new, but it seems much more apparent now. And so the idea that if we can know our human needs, we can get them met in ways that we're conscious of, and we can become aware of those emotional responses and separate ourselves from them, we can still maintain some sense of emotional health, even in the midst of all this, right?
Mm. Well, that's the hope, isn't it? I think we should be aiming for that. If you want a vision, it is that to help people understand their innate needs, even in school, and realize that everybody has to get their needs met. It's only fair, as it were, and that if something is stopping someone from getting some fundamental needs met, I mean, it's not a question of, it's not an all or nothing thing, it's more or less getting a need met for this, that, and the other is enough. But if people are seriously harmed by not getting the need for attention met, I mean, children just don't develop, their brains don't develop, literally. So they must get that need met, and they must have a degree of intimacy and love in their life from their carers, or later from other people when they grow older, and so on. So these things are critical, actually, absolutely critical, these needs.
So one other thing, and we can start wrapping up, but you have a brilliant kind of afterwards in the book on consciousness and thought. And so you kind of share an idea, and I guess I would like a little clarification on how learning and consciousness are linked.
Gosh, I didn't know you were going to talk about this. Consciousness is a fascinating subject. I mean, I've come to the conclusion that, in a sense, everything is conscious, including, wood, metal, everything, because it's to do with something in matter recognizing that it can combine with another form of matter and become something else. So it's that knowledge that's inside fields. A particle is a field. So there must be something carried in matter, in all matter, everywhere, throughout the universe, that knows that if for example, if hydrogen and oxygen combine in a certain way, they can make water, and that's a kind of knowledge, isn't it? And to recognize that that's possible is what consciousness is about. So I've come to the conclusion that the whole universe is conscious, and I think that's where mystics have got hold of that idea, and have written the most amazing poetry about it. Really astonishing. I could read you some if you gave me a minute to find it. But I mean,
I would love that. So I'll keep talking. If you want to see if you can find it, that'd be great. Okay. So, it's really well explained. So it's kind of this combination of, the Western objectivism and Eastern subjectivism, with the idea that behind everything that we can touch and perceive as matter, there's a unifying field, right? It's described as the ether, the field, consciousness, whatever that is. And has some intelligent force that animates all of physical matter and draws it together. And that consciousness flows through all of us. And it's the way that we're all connected into oneness, and that's right. And that flows through kind of all of this physical matter that we perceive as separate from us.
Yes. So you see, one of the ideas that you've been reading about is the idea that the smallest fields or particles known to science, to physics, is about says that all particles or all these little fields disappear and reappear, and they reappear in a slightly different place, and they call that an oscillation. But it doesn't take much to realize, or if that's happening in the laboratory, or in the world as we know it, it must be happening everywhere. So the entire universe is oscillating on and off, and that sent us off on a sort of a long period of discussion and talk and reading and thinking. And we came up with this notion that, well, the universe is oscillating, and but it's oscillating in a universal, eternal moment. So it's not like, so time in the way we normally think about it isn't existing. It's all happening in a moment, which is a very odd idea to get your head around. But hundreds of people, I've got lots and lots of examples of this, but I've just got some here, which I can, I'll read this out. There is no temporal interval between the annihilation and the remanifestation, so that one does not perceive an interruption between two analogous and successive creations. And this existence appears homogeneous. Insofar as man is a possibility of manifestation, but he does not see that which manifests him, he is pure absence. Contrarily, insofar as he received his being from the perpetual irradiation of the essence. And that was said by Ibn al-Arabi, an Andalusian Sufi. And then there's another one. This universe is changed and renewed unceasingly, which is what I've just been describing, at every moment and at every breath. Every instant, one universe is annihilated and another resembling it is taking its place. And the majority of men do not perceive this. And there's other sort of mystics that say, there's another one here, the real being under no condition of a thing and under no condition of nothing is called essence, absolute being, objectivity, and it is manifesting itself in all existences, and under condition of a thing and a nothing is the form of the universe. So, I mean, and for that to happen, there must be consciousness, because if matter is coming back to the next possibility, it must be conscious of what that next possibility can be for it. So really, the problem is these things are very, very hard to think about and talk about, because the moment you put knowledge into words, or an insight, a mystical insight into words, it ceases to be the truth in you. It just becomes knowledge,
Yeah. So you talk about in the book, it talks about our ability to have mystical experiences and access that field. And the less self-absorbed we are, the less selfish, the more we can merge into that field, the more we can observe experience directly. So do you have, and there's, many ways throughout the years we can start to access those experiences, but do you have any insights on maybe some shortcuts to how we can access that field of knowing and that direct experience of our world?
You can't make any progress in mystical development or that kind of development really without having patterns in you, because the brain's a pattern matching organ. So you have to sort of study the right sort of material first, and get patterns in your head of how things are from the poets and the mystics and the storytellers and so on, so that your brain has a sort of is prepared. You can't just take a shortcut, I'm afraid, Nicholas. It involves a time and effort reading material, and so but obvious things that have been taught for ages, like be less, try and be more caring and less selfish and all those kind of things, and trying to think for other people, of other people's points of view and so on. They're all important, but to actually understand the sort of things that need to be understood, if a human being is to connect with this greater field, requires preparation. It can't be done just by wishing it and wanting it.
So I got a pretty good distinction there, which is that if we can read about mystical experiences, then that creates a pattern in our brain that then allows us to imagine what it might be like, which can
Yeah,
lead to us
if you
having
don't
that
get too
experience.
if you don't get too excited about it, you know, you don't have to go and join a cult and start whirling and chanting and all that stuff. If you get too excited, it just won't happen for you. But you'll be very happy, possibly, you know, because you'll be making new friends as you're doing dancing, dervishings, or whatever you're doing, and chanting and saying Om and all this. But I mean, but that actually isn't what transforms people. I mean, if you you know this in America, that you've had lots and lots of these cults. And we've had them over here, but I think you get a lot more of them over there for some reason. Um, and it hasn't actually done America any good, has it?
No, I wouldn't think so.
So, you know, it doesn't work, basically, is what that means. There's something different that needs to happen in a population. And it's very hard to find for most people. And it involves effort, you know, it does involve listening to stories, reading, thinking, sort of meditating a bit on this, that, and the other. But without getting excited about it, without getting emotion. Emotions generally block us from seeing the more subtle things, you know. They just do.
Yeah, and I think the more we effort and try, the more we can consciously interfere with that experience happening. So, well, Ivan, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience today? This has been an amazing conversation.
Nothing jumps into. If anyone's interested in actually, education's important. Can I read something from my old friend Doris Lessing? She's dead now.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can cut this out if you don't find it useful, but I found it very. I mean, I knew Doris for a long time, and worked with her on 1 or 2 things, and she supported the Human Givens. Actually, gave us a bit of money at one point. This sums up my feelings about education. She says, ideally, what should be said to every child repeatedly throughout his or her school life is something like this. You are in the process of being indoctrinated. We have not yet evolved a system of education that is not a system of indoctrination. We are sorry, but it is the best we can do. What you are being taught here is an amalgam of current prejudice and the choices of this particular culture. The slightest look at history will show how impermanent these must be. You are being taught by people who have been able to accommodate themselves to a regime of thought laid down by their predecessors. It is a self-perpetuating system. Those of you who are more robust and individual than others will be encouraged to leave and find ways of educating yourself. Educating your own judgments, in other words. Those that stay must remember always and all the time that they are being molded and patterned to fit into the narrow and particular needs of this particular society. I quoted that in my memoir.
It's pretty good. Makes a lot of sense. Where can people find you and connect with you?
Well, on the Human Givens College website, I suppose. If you contact the college, they will always send emails to me. So I don't know if Gemma gave you, did she, the details of the college and so on?
Yep, I can get that. I'll put that all in the links for the show notes. And then again, I'll put all the book links in there, and I highly recommend.
You can get a new edition of Human Givens on. We also read another book called Godhead, where we explored those ideas we've just been talking about, consciousness, in greater depth and richness, I think. So
I saw that. I haven't got it yet, but that did look like a pretty interesting read.
Yeah. Okay. So if you can put those up for us, that would be very, very nice.
I will absolutely do that. Well, thank you for your time today. It has been enlightening.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Nicholas, and I hope we talk again one day.
It's been my pleasure.
Okay.